wow. That's all I have to say about the new How to Train Your Dragon remake is wow. It actually surprised me. I was honestly prepared when I was coming home to make this video that I was going to have to say, you know what guys, it's not that great, I don't recommend watching it. But I just came back from watching the early access of How to Train Your Dragon, and I have to say, there are things to not like about this movie, without a doubt. I think that was sort of a given from the start, but there are a lot of things to really like about this movie. I was not expecting to love this movie as much as I do now, because I really thought that this movie was going to flunk, because I was just fearing to God that DreamWorks was basically going to follow in Disney's footsteps and just ruin all of their live-action remakes, but I don't think they have. I really think for their very first live-action remake of a cartoon, I think this really works. This is a good live-action remake because it's made by DreamWorks and not Disney. So if you've seen the original animated movie 15 years ago, you will know already that there's really no point in dropping spoilers because you would have seen it already 15 years ago. So if you've seen the movie as I did when you were a kid, then you'll already know what happens throughout the movie. You know, Hiccup shoots down Toothless with his crossbow thing or whatever, and eventually they bond, they gain Astrid's trust, and eventually save the day fighting the Red Death Dragon or whatever. But I can't believe I'm saying this, but there were elements to the live-action version that were way better than the animated version. And chief among which, I think, is the first thing I can think of off the top of my head, is they actually made the Red Death. It's not like how it was in the cartoon, where it's just, you know, some giant blue thing with red spikes all over it. No, this is an actual, honest-to-God, red-colored dragon. Mostly black, but instead of red spikes, it actually has a large coloration of red all over its body, most dominantly on the head, but I love the Red Death design. So, let's start from the beginning, because, well, actually, I can't start from the beginning, because I was confused on what the showing time was, because I thought when I looked at my ticket, it said 7:15, but I then got all my snacks and stuff and I went to the theater and it was already playing. So I basically showed up about 15 to 20 minutes into the movie. So I wasn't, you know, like super late to the movie, but I'm gonna go watch it again sometime later. But I mean, if you know what happens in the cartoon, then you'll know exactly what will happen in the live-action version. So there's really no point in, you know, hiding spoilers because you would have seen it already. One of the biggest nitpicks I have about this movie is the casting. I don't understand half of the casting decisions in this movie. Chief among which, I think, has to be Nick Frost as Gobber. I just don't... I can mind it. I can deal with it. But throughout the movie, and I knew this was going to happen. I knew this was going to be one of my biggest issues. The acting was not going to be as great as it was in the cartoon. It just wasn't. Gerard Butler as Stoic, he's back in this as a live-action version of himself. He was probably one of the best parts about the acting. But even then, it just kind of seemed like... it just didn't sound right. It just didn't sound genuine. It didn't sound like he was actually, you know, I don't know. It was just weird. It's sort of like when you get an actor that actually plays their role in a movie about, like, 10 or so years ago, and then they come back to do a skit as that character, and it's on a budget, so therefore they're not going to act as good as they used to. But I know that that wasn't the case, because this movie was expensive. So I don't know. Maybe they saved time on the acting or something. I don't know. But then there's another issue I have, which is the twins. I don't understand the logic at all there. Because the whole point of twins is because they look identical. And as you can plainly see, these twins look nothing alike. Like, nothing at all. So I don't really know what the whole deal of that was. And another big controversy about this movie is Astrid's actress, Nico Parker, or whatever her name is. I understand what everyone's talking about, but honestly, she did an okay job. I'm not going to give her any hate, because she actually did a really good job at playing an incarnation of Astrid. It actually worked. And one thing that this movie did right that I don't think the cartoon did was really flesh out her character. Because one of the things that were immediately introduced to the fact is that Astrid is more of a daughter to Stoic than Hiccup is as his son. But again, they really did an okay job with her. I think she actually did pretty okay. And the same thing can be said for the other kid who plays Hiccup. I forgot his name, but the kid who plays Hiccup is actually a good Hiccup. I'm not gonna lie. So that's the acting. And everything else about it was okay. The CGI obviously was fantastic. I mean, it's kind of hard to say it, but I really do think that the dragons in this movie looked more real than the dinosaurs in any of the Jurassic films. It's weird. There's an element to them that is there that makes them look even more real that isn't there with the dinosaurs in any of the Jurassic films. It's really strange. I can't explain it. Another thing that I had a problem with was closer towards the end of the movie, and this isn't so much of a spoiler, it's just sort of an animation bug or something. I don't really know what it was, but partway through the ending fight of the movie, when Hiccup and Toothless are up in the air and they're fighting the Red Death, there's a scene where the Red Death starts spewing fire up in the clouds, and for a split second, I really thought, and you can see this in the trailer too, I believe, it looks like, and I swear to God, I'm hoping they didn't do it at the same time I think they did. The fire that the Red Death is spewing out, it looks like it was AI generated. Because when you look at anything made by AI, it always has that sort of soft, watery texture look to it. And you could see that with the fire that the Red Death was, spewing out. It just didn't really look right to me. And I understand that, they're up in the clouds, so obviously when you spew fire, it will get mixed up in with the clouds. But, I mean, you can tell apart. I think you would still be able to tell apart what looks like fire and what looks like a cloud. And unfortunately, I think as a way to save money, but also just to kind of cut the animators some slack, was to use some AI for the fire. So I think as a way to save money and also to cut the animators some slack from, actually overworking themselves, I think they ended up using AI to animate the fire shots because they really do look like it was AI generated. The rest of the movie was all CGI. I can comfortably say that. The dragons were, the background was, but any shot with the Red Death's fire, it just didn't look right for some reason. Now, that doesn't mean that if they did use AI that it makes it a bad movie, because it certainly was not a bad movie at all. This was a genuinely really good, solid live-action remake. If you had never seen the cartoon, I think this is still a really good, just overall a really good movie. Oh, by the way, I should mention too, in this movie, it's nowhere near the same run length as the cartoon. Unlike the cartoon, where most DreamWorks animated movies are normally an hour and a half long, sometimes an hour and 40 minutes long, this movie was, I think, roughly 2 hours long. They added an extra 20 minutes in there, or it felt like that, honestly, because there were scenes that they extended, and there were scenes that weren't even in the cartoon that they decided to add. This movie, I just cannot get over how brilliant this was. I was genuinely prepared to dislike it because I just had that stigma attached that all of the live-action remakes of any company would just be bad. The only ones, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, the only live-action remakes I think were actually better than the cartoon versions were the Mowgli movie and the Jungle Book remake. But I feel like this comes pretty close. But I just have to say, this was definitely a breath of fresh air for live-action remakes in general, because there's been so many that have just been crap, really. And granted, all of them were made by Disney, but this was the first DreamWorks remake. Everyone has to remember that. You can't go into this movie thinking that it's going to be the same movie as the cartoon, because it's not. There are a lot of elements to it that are definitely different. Oh, I should have mentioned too, one thing that I do want to mention about the animation was in the first movie, in the scene where Toothless is drawing and then he eventually, Hiccup walks up to him and then Toothless, puts his nose on his hand. In the cartoon version, there was an animation error where he looks like he hesitates for a second, he recoils for a second, and then he eventually puts his nose on Toothless's hand. And in the live-action trailer, well, first of all, I should say, that was a complete error on DreamWorks' fault, but it fit so beautifully into the cartoon because it made it more genuine that this animal would hesitate, but then, it takes a chance and actually begins to trust a human. And in the live action trailer, that wasn't there. So everyone was basically thinking, oh, well, they're not going to include it now because that was an error that, you know, they didn't intend to make in the cartoon. So we're not going to include it in the live action version. But I am pleased to say that I can't believe they did this. I wasn't expecting this. They included that scene. They cut it from the trailer, but they brought it back, I think, because everyone complained about it. Because everyone knew that it was an error in the cartoon. And when we all saw it in the live action trailer, we all kind of complained about it. And I'm happy to say they brought that error back with this one. Only this time, I think it was intended, obviously, because everyone liked it in the cartoon. They brought that back in the live action version. So Toothless actually does hesitate to put his nose on Hiccup's hand, which is brilliant. That is fantastic. Overall, I think this was honestly a really good, solid movie and a good way to celebrate 15 years of the original How to Train Your Dragon. This remake, I think, really works. This is a remake I am proud to say is probably as good as the original cartoon. This is a live action remake I am proud to say is actually as good as the cartoon it's based on. And I know that a lot of people will be complaining. They will find nitpicks to not like about it, but I think that's just sort of a given with every live action remake. So, you know, there's going to be nitpicks with everything. But in terms of like a DreamWorks live action remake, I think this is a really good start, and I cannot wait to watch the sequel. And you will find things to dislike about it, I know, but trust me, it's worth it. You need to watch this. That's about it. Thank you for watching.